So folks, a very warm welcome to Support Vectors. This is a very short session, and the purpose of this session is to help you set up your development environment for AI. In particular, to set up your development environment using Python. Most of you have a laptop or a workstation or something. Now, many of you already have Python, and you may be using tools like pip, conda, pipx, poetry, or one of these tools. But I'll go with a baseline assumption that you don't have anything at all on your machine. You are just bringing in a fresh laptop. Uh, Whatever I say about a fresh install is applicable also to you if you have been using any one of those tools like pip or conda, anaconda, or miniconda, or poetry, or pipx, and so on and so forth. I'm going to talk about setting up your AI development environment using an entirely new tool. It's a new kid on the block called UV. UV. Now, this this will be a learning goal. We would like to exit this session, a very short session, with a functionally complete AI development environment. It assumes no prior setup on your machine. So if you get stuck or if you do need help, stop me. What I'm going to do is first walk you through what we are going to do, and then we are going to do it. Does that seem reasonable? So remember that we are going to focus only on Python for AI development. So in particular, we are not going to talk about AI development with Rust, with C++, with R, and adjacent languages with Julia, etc., which are all great languages, but will be focused only with Python. Now, when it comes to setting up your development environment, the first question that people ask is, should I use an integrated development environment? Or should I just use a text editor like Atom or Emacs or VI and so forth? Well, usually these are very personal decisions. If you are a minimalist, a lot of people, they just stick to Emacs or VI or Sublime or Atom or any just text editor. And then they find that they have to add a lot of plugins to it. So you end up with a very customized setup of your own VI install and so forth. But the vast majority of people, they would rather not reinvent the wheel, but they go with one of the popular so-called Python integrated development environments, which means that you just download one thing and most of the essential pieces are installed in that application. That application helps you write code, build code, ship code, and so on and so forth. Right? This has become particularly relevant these days when we are talking about AI-assisted code generation. As you know, ever since the large language models came up, code generation has become a fact of life. Today, it is hard to find any developer who does not take the assistance of a code generator. These AI assist tools or copilots are very mature now. There's even people, luminaries like Andre Karpathy has mentioned that the vast majority of code he writes gets auto-written by the code generators, the AI code generators. And this, we are talking about somebody who is in the habit of writing very deep, very meaningful code, not just standard business code. So you can imagine that for the mere mortals like us, a lot of our code can actually get written with the judicious use of the AI tools. It doesn't mean that we blindly use the AI tools, but having access to these AI tools is a game changer. In fact, one of the first things I enforce within my own team is that people use some form of an AI assist tool, whatever happens to be their favorite. So from that perspective, these IDs are very good because almost all major IDs have integration with AI tools. Then the second thing that we'll learn today is a new package and project management tool. It is called UV. It is a replacement for prior tools like pip, poetry, conda, miniconda, and so on and so forth, pipx and whatnot. And you will see why it is a good replacement. There are good reasons for it. Then, what are the main steps that we are going to follow today? We will install an AI-enabled IDE. Now, this is something that I won't go through. It's very easy. All you have to do is pick an IDE of your choice and click install, and it will just go install it on your machine. Now your machine, I will assume that your operating systems are um, hopefully Linux, Mac, or worst case, Windows, right? But not something else, because I wouldn't know how to, for example, run it on an operating system that I have myself not experienced. Okay? And my experience is predominantly Linux and second Mac. So you will see a bit of a bias in the way I proceed. The second part of things that we will do is install the UV package management tool. You will realize that this is surprisingly easy. In fact, it's a one-line install. Once you run this on the shell, you don't even have to install Python. And this is something worth mentioning. On your machine, do not feel the need to install Python before you start. In fact, I would dissuade you from installing Python uh, completely somewhere else, or use whatever the operating system's Python version is, unless you have a need to. You will have a much more clean, well-managed situation if you just let this tool UV do all the work for you. Right? So UV will install whichever version of Python that you need to work in a project. Python is a fast evolving language. Libraries are able to catch up with it. And quite often what happens is some library will work with one version of Python, but not with another. For example, PyTorch, the leading artificial intelligence library at this moment, only works with Python 3.12. It does not work with 3.13 at this moment. So if you download the latest Python, it proves counterproductive. And in fact, you would rather that you use EV to manage Python in the virtual environment, and we'll see how. Then we'll create a project. And once we create a project, we'll build it, we'll create documentation, we'll run it, and so on and so forth. So that's what we are going to do today. So first stop, we set up an integrated development environment. The three leading contenders that I know of and that I am quite familiar with, and just to give you a bit of a personal history, I have been a big fan of JetBrains PyCharm IntelliJ for many, many years. When it comes to Python, it is amazingly powerful. Unfortunately, it's a paid tool. You have to pay for it. And more and more, the bandwidth or the mindshare went over to Visual Studio Code, which is free. So you could install Visual Studio Code. People like Visual Studio Code for another reason, because in Visual Studio Code, you can also do your JavaScript and other things, which, by the way, you can do in IntelliJ also. But Visual Studio Code seems to be a very popular choice. And it's also a very powerful IDE. A lot of work being done is based on it. Then recently, there is a new kid on the block, which is Cursor. Cursor is an AI-focused IDE. We live in the world of AI. So it is the first very mature IDE that has been thought from the ground up with AI in mind. The core hypothesis is, if AI is so good at code generation and understanding what we want to do, and not just code generation, by the way, I keep saying code generation, that's a fallacy. AI helps review your code. It helps find bugs in your code, right? It suggests improvements to your code. So for all of those reasons, we now live in an AI-centered world. And so Cursor is an IDE that is AI first. As an AI first, by the way, the reason that they have matured so fast, creating an IDE is a horrendously expensive task. It takes armies of developers and decades to create a mature IDE. So things like IntelliJ, JetBrains, IntelliJ PyCharm, they are the result of hundreds of engineers working for decades. Likewise, Visual Studio Code is the work of hundreds of engineers, one would imagine. Cursor seems to be a new kid on the block created by perhaps a dozen or two engineers, really bright guys. And the reason, by a startup, and the reason they were able to do so well is thanks to Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is open source. Its code server, it's all its assets are available. And in some sense, what Cursor asked is, how can we use the Visual Studio Code's core, but have a completely different user experience that is AI first? And in some sense, you can argue Though that wouldn't be fair, that to a large extent, Cursor is a new AI-centered user experience on top of VS Code. Right? So pick one of these. Each of them have their strengths. Visual Studio Code is, of course, enough said about it. It is very popular in the developer community. It gives you, nowadays, if you couple it up with Copilot or with any of the AI tools, if you look into the extensions, there's a plethora of AI tools that can be code assists for you, intelligent code assists for you. It is highly extensible, highly customizable through its marketplace. It is lightweight and fast. What is best is it has excellent terminal integration and Git support. Those of us developers tend to live on the command line shell, and it has excellent integration with the shell and, of course, with Git. Most of us are committing our code to Git these days. So it does that. And I believe it does have integration with other source control systems also. But Git has emerged more or less as a de facto standard these days. One of the points that I didn't mention, but is quite relevant, especially if you are taking workshops and courses that support vectors, is that in AI, you work on projects that need very expensive hardware, powerful hardware. Right? So, for example, sometimes it can get a bit ridiculous too. If I'm right, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman at one point thought, let's create $1 trillion investment into AI infrastructure. Right? And now that we look at it, it's actually not an exaggeration. The whole world is coming around to the fact that AI needs massive infrastructure. Now, massive infrastructure is one end of the spectrum. Your humble laptop is the other end of the spectrum. Laptops optimize convenience, usability, and minimize power consumption. They're efficient machines. So the one of the features that Visual Studio really has is that you can use your laptop as the IDE, as the front end, but you would be connected to a powerful server in the back end. So your code, everything is running on the powerful AI server, and you're tunneling into it using a SSH tunnel, right? But you have the beauty and convenience of your local ID, local user interface, which for people who use Mac or people like who use one of the beautiful Linux user interfaces like KDE is a huge plus, because you could be using a beautiful user interface, have all the conveniences of gestures and mouse control and whatnot. But at the back end, you're connected to a mighty server on which the only thing available is terminal access or shell access. Right? So VS Code gives you that strength. And this is how VS Code looks. Most of you are familiar with it. Second is Cursor. Cursor inherits all the strengths of VS Code because it is based on a backbone of VS Code, but it adds upon it. It is very AI centered. And I perhaps, if time permits, I'll create a project bring it up in Cursor, and then we'll have a look at it. Right? And we'll try to do something. As they say, they call themselves the AI code editor. And then there's PyCharm, the old workhorse, and a very, very powerful IDE. So unfortunately, you have to pay for it, right? You need a subscription, annual subscription, and you pay for it. But it does, especially the code refactoring abilities of PyCharm, I think are unbeatable. Right? They're just deep and vast. And so I tend to switch actually in a project between Cursor and PyCharm. Oh, it's a horse race. Like, like it depends upon what date it is. So today, January 21st, you may say, I like Cursor better today. And you'll wake up by Sunday and say, okay, no, PyCharm has caught up. And by the way, those extra features in PyCharm I like better. They are very, like, see, PyCharm is making, and all of these are the three leading horses. They all have deep inroads into AI. And at the end of it, it becomes a matter of personal choice. Right? I must also say that, yes, code refactoring ability of PyCharm is unbeatable. It's really, really very good. A Visual Studio Code plus Copilot is less than Cursor. Cursor has really thought through and created AI models dedicated to programming. Copilot used to be very good. Today, one can argue. Um, I personally did like, so for many years, for a couple of years, I've been using VS Code with Copilot ever since Copilot paid up. I'm still a loyal subscriber to Copilot, the full version. Nevertheless, I must say now that maybe it's time to cancel the subscription because it's pointless. It is nowhere comparable to the power of Cursor, right? And Cursor, the default is they have their own models and they use Cloud 3.5 and so on and so forth. Generally, it does much better. So that's that. Now, I won't install the IDEs because IDEs are simple and we can do a longer install session if you need and help you install the IDEs, or just stay back today after the formal session. I can help you install the IDEs. Right? It's a one-click install. Go to their website, whatever operating system you have, they'll give you an executable binary to install it, right? And just go install it in most cases. Now, what I'll focus on is this new thing that not many people seem to have yet heard of, but it's been growing for quite some time. It is called UV. They call themselves the modern package and project management tool. And my first interaction with it, I must say, was tangential. I realized that compared to pip, if I install packages using UV, it was lightning fast. If I did pip, it would just drag on and on and on and slowly install sequentially, dependency after dependency. The other thing that irritated me with pip was that if you install one thing, sometimes it would go and uninstall something else and downgrade a version. Right? Many of you must have seen that dependency management with UV with pip has a huge scope for improvement. Right? And it was always problematic. It is the dependency hell we all used to face. So the big strength of UV is that it really does dependency management well. In fact, most of you are used to writing your requirements.txt in which you hardwire the versions, right, of your projects. And I'm talking now for people who are quite familiar with Python and all the pains that come with Python projects taking it to production and having different versions of the project. The lock files and freezing the dependencies has always been a bit of a problem with pip, or at least maybe my own level of expertise with pip was not to such a superlative degree that I didn't screw up. I would screw up often. So on the other hand, the thing that compelled me to move to UV was, oh my God, I don't have to worry about dependency management at all. I never have to specify the version. Most of the time, I wouldn't say never, but most of the time I don't have to explicitly specify the version of any dependency. I just have to name the dependency and UV would automatically make sure that all my dependencies, to the extent that it is possible, are mutually consistent. Right? So just think about it. Having dependencies that are mutually consistent, that for me was the big reason. So, well, I of course, just to elaborate the point, I made a straw man sort of an argument and showed you this picture of a rundown building with graffiti to a bit of hyperbole for what it used to be before UV came out. There were all these tools, pip, conda, poetry, pipx, etc. But they did have a bit of problems. Now, the UV approach addresses three key challenges: performance optimizations, reliability improvements, and modern features. These are the three things that come with it. What do we mean by performance optimization? The proof of the pudding is in the eating. When we do the demo, when we actually create a project with UV, you will see what it means. It's just lightning fast. Right? You would imagine that, well, Python code never runs this fast, you would say, or rarely runs this fast. And indeed, that is true because UV is written in Rust, not Python. So it's a compiled code and it runs at native speed. It is up to 10 to 15 times faster than pip for large dependency trees. In AI, large dependency trees is a given, no way of escaping it. You work with large language models. Not only is the model large, your dependency list is large on the open source projects. It's huge quite often, right? So one of the nice things is that UV handles that very well. So for AI people, it's indispensable in my opinion. The other thing is it does parallel download. Suppose you find that to get this library, you need to it depends on 10 other libraries. It will do a parallel download and it does a very good caching of it. It has reliability improvements. and it has something very good called log file. So see, when you ship products to production, ship it out, you have to know exactly what was the version of each of the libraries. And so those things you usually do with these log files. And the log file handling is very, very good. It has consistent behavior across platforms, whether you're on Linux or you're on Mac. The other thing that is really nice about it is it takes the philosophy that every project should have its own virtual environment, right? And it keeps the libraries of that project within that virtual environment, right? So it keeps the project self-contained. It's very nice actually from that perspective. You don't worry that if you do any other project on the machine, there will be conflict. So the virtual environment, the fact that it's built into the project, um, is really one of the strong features of UV. Yes, yeah. So a lot of these things. So in other words, it doesn't invent everything from the ground up. It's not necessarily the inventor, but it has adopted a lot of the best practices. So that's one thing. And modern features, it has a native support both for wheel and source distributions. Why do we need both? As you know, in Python, you distribute your work, your projects to be run as wheel files. If you download things from PyPy, you'll get by default a wheel file and install it. The trouble is, if your wheel file, if the wheel file doesn't quite agree with your platform, then a best practice is that you also ship your source distribution, and your source will be recompiled on your native platform, and that's the fallback. So it has a support for both. Smart dependency resolution, by the way, is dependency tree. It does a global consistency check. Right? Also, it has a good compatibility with existing tools like requirements.txt, pyproject.toml. If you have those, it sort of plays nice with all of those things. Again, I want to go straight to hands-on, so I'll keep it brief. Now, the best practices, so there's some best practices with UV. I'm mentioning it because it's worth looking at. First is always use log files for production deployments. It creates a log file, use it, and it becomes very easy. The other thing is, see, when you have a project that depends on 10 different projects, 10 different libraries, 100 different libraries, more like it, those libraries are evolving while you're writing code. It is always a good idea to do UV sync upgrade. What it will do is it will automatically pull the latest versions of those libraries. Sometimes those libraries need not be open source. It is the code base that you depend on. It's the feature that you depend on, but comes from the neighboring team within your own organization. They have pushed a new version of their library or their code, and you need to sync up with it. So the command is as simple as that. UV sync hyphen upgrade will do that. Of course, always leverage the UV's virtual environment management. Never do without it. And keep UV updated for latest features and improvement. UV is a very recent project management tool, fast evolving, right? Rapidly new versions of it are coming out, and I would encourage you to use it. There are lots of resources attached to UV. Uh, there's the GitHub, the community forums active, issue tracker if you notice some problems with it. And then there's some guides on how to contribute to the UV project. So do please join that. And so finally, let's go get started. How do we get started? And I'll just sort of give you an idea of how simple it is, and then we'll do it. To install it, and this is the one command I expect you to do, based on whether you are on a Mac or a Linux, just give this command, the one that's in green here, where my mouse is. Just give this command on your machine. You notice that I use Mac OS and Linux. And I'm giving not a good treatment to the Windows guys. I apologize because I'm not very skilled with Windows. And frankly, in the AI world, using Windows gets you into a whole world of problems. You have to use Windows subsystem for Linux, which means you are running Linux on Windows. If you're running Linux on Windows, you might as well run Linux. So if you're running WSL, then this command will work in your WSL. But don't do it on just the Windows natively, because I don't know of anyone in a pretty wide circle of AI engineers whom I've seen getting very excited about doing AI development on Windows. Guys, were you able to take down this command? It's the only command that you need to run on your shell. You might have to put a sudo before it. So if it did run, then The next world is amazingly, pleasantly easy. If you want to create a project, let's say we want to create a project called Hello World. What you do is you just say UV init Hello World. When you say UV init Hello World, and by the way, it's always a good idea to specify the Python version. Here I've specified Python version 3.12. Why did I say 3.12? Guys, here's a reality. Today, most of the AI projects that you depend upon will either use Python 12 or 3.12 or 3.11. So if you want to be super safe, if you're using one of the projects that are still dragging their feet to modernize, they might still be on 3.11. Most of the projects run on 3.12. Do not move to 3.13 yet. Some large projects like PyTorch have still not moved to 3.13. So stick to 3.12. So this is it. Now, once you have created, once you do this, a empty project will be created. It will contain a Py project, toml, and so on and so forth. What you should do now is enter that directory. Do you notice that I'm doing cd hello world? You enter the directory. By the way, notice the fact that I just asked you to install UV. I did not ask you to install Python. In particular, I did not ask you to install the Python 3.12 version at all, because UV will take care of that. When you say UV sync, what it does is it automatically will go and check whether your machine has 3.12, or if not, it will go and download 3.12. And not only that, it will create a virtual environment in your machine. So UV sync is the most important thing. You enter the directory, cd hello world, then you do UV sync. It downloads Python if it needs to, that particular version of the Python if you need to. It also creates the virtual environment for you. Once you have the virtual environment, this is a common thing in the Python world. Virtual environment just getting created doesn't mean that you are inside that virtual environment. So what is a virtual environment in Python? Think of it as a very lightweight VM, virtual machine. It gives you a containment or an isolation. Whatever you do inside the virtual environment remains yours. And whatever other people do outside the virtual environment, ideally, does not impact you. Are we together? So in some sense, it serves the same job as a Docker container or a virtual machine does. But it is far more lightweight. It's very Python specific. So with that, now you activate that virtual environment. You enter. Think of activating a virtual environment as saying, I'm opening the door to this world and I'm entering the world. Right? So you're entering the world here called Hello World. And when you do that, typically a good shell, you notice that where my mouse is, can you guys see where my mouse is hovering? You will notice that your shell will develop a prefix called Hello World, just to clue you into the fact that you are now in that particular virtual environment. So one basic, it need not be say whether you use UV or any of the pip or conda, whatever it is, the one constant in the Python world has been, you must always do development in a virtual environment. It is not a requirement, but not doing that is practically a recipe for trouble. You should never work outside a virtual environment in Python. So now, once you have done that, the next step is, suppose, now one of the things you do is, let's say that you're doing a machine learning project. You will depend on the usual suspects. You'll depend on pandas, NumPy, scikit-learn, matplotlib, PyTorch, blah, 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 lots of things. Now, this is what UV does very well. To add those libraries as dependencies, all you do is you say UV add and you give a list of libraries. Here, pandas, NumPy, scikit-learn. I just took 3 examples. When you do that, you will notice that it literally works blazing fast. But the most important thing is, if you see, it knows which version of the libraries to bring in and what those libraries depend upon, and it will bring those dependencies also. So you gave 3 library name, but it brought in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It brought in 10 libraries, right? Because for those libraries to function, they have their own dependencies. And not only that, it was smart enough to know what is the combination of the latest versions of those libraries that actually work together. And that is one of the powerful features of UV that you do. Once you have done that, it's very easy. one of the conveniences that UV does when it creates a project is it will very helpfully create a very tiny script for you, a hello.py script that just prints out hello world. So you can actually build your project. You can say UV build, and when you do UV build, it will build a wheel file and a tarzip file, tarzip archive file. And then it is as simple as that. You feel like running your project, as simple as that. Now, now one of the things that I suggest is, see, typically we say Python and a script name, isn't it? And those of you who are familiar with Python, you run a file by saying Python and then the name of the file, Python file. But in the UV, there's a convenience. You can just say UV run. When you say UV run, it is going to run your program. UV run hello.py, because every project that it creates, it inserts a little hello.py just as a sanity check for you. And so that is it. That is UV. And then UV, I mean, there's more to it. It's a whole world, and it's a fast evolving and growing world of tools. If you want to install tools, for example, Rough, why would you use Rough? Rough is an amazing linter. It finds all the problems in your source code, in the code that you write. Many of you are probably used to Sonar, Cube, and things like that. Check style, find bugs, whatnot. So in Java world is similar to that. Rough itself is written in Rust, and again, very, very fast. Now, if you're not used to Rough to analyze your code, I would strongly suggest that go to your IDE, look at the extensions, and one of the first extensions you should install in your favorite IDE is Rough. It's an amazing tool. It's an amazing fast Python linter and formatter. It does all. Lightning fast, it does its job. And so you can install a whole list of tools, and you can, if you want to run that tool Rough, all you have to say is UVX. X is for tool. It's the same. It's a short form for saying UV tool run and something like that. Now that is for that thing. Now, many of you are planning to take courses here at Support Vector, so I'll go to the second part of it. One of the things that I would suggest is UV won't do it for you. It will treat the root directory of the project that you created as the place where you will write your source code, which is not a good practice. Everybody writes, that is good for simplicity, for testing ideas out, but you should always have your source code, in my view, in a source subdirectory, and your test cases in a test subdirectory. Right? So what you can do is you should append the following to your pyproject.toml, the main project manifest or project configuration. This particular section, by the way, this entire presentation will be shared on the Discord. And those of you who are here for the first time and you haven't joined the Discord, I strongly, strongly advise you to join the Support Vectors Meetup Discord. The link is there on meetup.com/supportvectors. If you want to run your PyTest, it's very easy. You see UV run PyTest, and it will run all your test cases. So that is it. Now, enough of introduction. It's time to do it. What say you guys? Let's try and do it. So what I'm going to do is get out of the presentation mode and get to bring forward the actual shell. All right, guys. So this is a Unix shell. I'm using Mac here. So what I'll do is I'll open a new shell. Here is a new shell. And what I'll do is I'll repeat what I said. Suppose we want to create a project. Let me just say, let's give it a project. Now, many of you know that I have a golden retriever whom I'm very, very fond of. And the name of that golden retriever is Sonu. So good time for me to create a project. And whenever I think of creating a project, rarely can I think of a better name than, well, her name. So I'll create a project called Sonu. Right? Python 3.12. So again, observe that I'm being particular.
You mean UV init?
Oh, sorry, UV init. Sorry. Thank you for correcting me. Why did I say UV install? UV init, right? So UV init Sonu. So observe that I am being particular about giving the Python version. It is always a good idea, as I said, especially if you're doing AI projects. So you notice that a project has been initialized in my home directory. And so I can enter Sonu. There we go. Oh, look at this. My Sonu project has been created. Let's see what is there in this project. It has three things. It has a README file, a a Python, and a project configuration. Let's look at each of these one by one. When I look at README, empty. Right? Nice. Waiting for me to write something, I suppose. This is again a best practice, guys. Never push a project, especially to GitHub or anything, your own Git, without putting a README. Other people should know what in the world this project does. At this moment, it's empty. Hello. Now, did I say that UV creates a tiny little project just for you to do your sanity checks? And here we go. Hello from Sonu. Woof, woof. And then, here we go. The last one was pyproject.toml. So let's look at this project. This project says name is this, version is this, description, you can add your description, README, requirements, dependency. One of the things that I suggest to people as a minimum is that it is always a good idea to make some basic edits to the project. Like for example, in support vectors, we have a convention that we create all the projects with a prefix as we learn, support vectors, learning, right? And let's say that I give it a version as something like this, or for whatever reason. You can add a description here. There we go. It says the README file. Now notice that this project has no dependencies at this moment. We haven't declared any dependencies, but we are saying that you should use anything like 3.12 Python. Right? Why? Because we specified that. Now, here is how we stand in AI. Most projects use 3.12. Very few projects work with 3.13. And some older projects still are sitting on 3.11. So when it says require Python, sometimes if you may be forced to downgrade it to 3.11. But remember, it has some implications. So be careful. If you keep going down and being ultra safe, you can say greater than 3.10, but not a good idea because then you start losing features. So I'll save this much. Now notice that there are no dependencies in this project. Now, what is the next thing we will do? We will say UV sync and with upgrade. Well, at this moment, there are no dependencies, so we don't, upgrade makes more sense when you are asking your project to get synced and upgraded to the latest version of all the dependency libraries. But here it doesn't. But what it does is, observe the sentence where it says, using CPython 3.12. You said greater than 3.12, so it chose 3.12.18, 3.12.8, and then it created a VN, created a virtual environment in this. So if you do an list of files, then you will notice that there is a directory created .env. Very helpfully, it also creates a .gitignore. These are the nice things about this. Why? Because when you build Python projects, you don't want these things to get checked into your Git. Right? So it creates a fairly sensible gitignore for you. Right? So now that it has been done, at this moment, what can we do? Let us add some dependency. Suppose I were to do UV add, and let's take a dependency. I will say NumPy, well, pandas, matplotlib, just name a few. I don't know. We added pandas, etc. Let's take 3 libraries. Oh, notice how immediately, how utterly fast it was that it installed all the libraries. Now, those of you who are used to pip or something else, poetry, etc., you would remember that things never happen so fast there. Right? This is it. Now, you can see the effect of this. Let's look into PyTorch, Tamil. Do you notice that dependencies? Right? And not only that, it figured out the right version numbers. the appropriate version number of those dependencies. Now, one thing to pay attention to is the UV lock file. The UV lock file is your publishing, like when you go to production, your manifest, essentially. It tells you not only the things you depend on, but just about everything that you need for this project to work. So UV log file, at this moment, if you're new to Python, you don't have to pay too much attention, but you will when you are taking your projects to production. So here we are, we have created a project that has 3 dependencies. Now what can you do? Let's go build this project. UV build. Oh, look at that. So fast, it already built. You might say, well, big deal. There was nothing in the project, right? There was only one hello world script, right? So let's run that. UV run hello.py. And sure enough, you say, hello from Sonu. Actually, Sonu never says hello. So perhaps I should go and edit it. Much better. Let's try that. Ah, that's much better. Woof, woof, from Sonu. Now, suppose you have this project and you feel like uh, you have this, you want to publish it. Once again, by the way, you change the code. So you might want to go build it. You build it. Now, one of the things that people want to do is they want, if you have a PyPy repository, PyPy account, and you want to publish this project, how would you do that? You would do UV publish. Ah, look at this. It has gotten, your project just gotten, hopefully open source project, just got published to the internet too. Let's go and verify if this is really true. Let's go to PyPy. SV learn core, SV learn. Okay. So no. Okay, there is no, not that. We have SV learn bootcamp. Maybe it hasn't indexed its search yet. So I'll skip that. But if you look for it, the search hasn't updated it. But you can tell that I have already published some um, projects, right, which I created exactly the same way. So this is how you do, guys. This is a short introduction to creating it. Now, for those of you who are going to take courses here at Support Vectors, who are going to do a bit of a boot camp, I wanted to show you that we have some more utilities that we created. So for that, I'm going to repeat this project, repeat all the steps, and that would be a good review for the rest of you. The courses are starting from the first week of February, February 1st. Our large language model bootcamp starts on February 1st, Saturday. Our AI agents bootcamp, as you know, agents is the big thing these days. And galloping ahead, the coming Saturday, the one after that, the February 1st, the first Saturday of February and the first Sunday of February, 1st and 2nd. The portal where we can sign up, thank you for asking for that, is supportvectors.ai. If you go to supportvectors.ai, guys, you can go to the schedule of upcoming schedule, and you will notice that all the dates are published. There are 3 foundational courses that we encourage people to take if they are new to AI. One of them is the Foundations of AI, Neural Network, LLMs, and Gen AI. This is on Tuesday and Thursday evening, 7 to 9:30 p.m. It starts on February the 4th, the first Tuesday of February. The second is a Large Language Models Bootcamp. It starts on February 1st, Saturday. It is a 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's an all Saturday class. And then the AI Agents Bootcamp is our fresh offering. We used to have an AI agent course, but AI agent as a subject has become so big that as we did the curriculum development, we had a hard time packing it into 4 months. So it will be a packed 4-month of AI agents bootcamp. The subject is exploding. LLM is exploding. AI itself is exploding. So that starts on Sunday. Again, it is Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m. And then, of course, there's lab solutions, walkthrough, and extra days. Besides that, we have some specialized courses. Those of you who are into ML ops and LLM ops, maybe it may interest you to do that, but we sort of presume that you know about LLMs and handling LLMs and that. We have RAG and AI search, one of the big use cases these days is RAG. In fact, the most successful use case of generative AI being adopted in the enterprise, almost completely validated. Every enterprise sees the value of that. It is retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, and AI search. I jokingly call it the RAG to riches journey. You just need to know RAG to be rich. That's how it goes these days. Because really, you can walk into any company and they will need you. Very high demand for that skill. Fine tuning, LLM fine tuning techniques is again a specialized course we teach of great value to if you are going to fine tune your model, not just download it off the internet and run. Now, fine tuning is a dangerous art. It's like surgery. As in surgery, it matters not only what you fix, but what mistakes you don't make. The LLMs are extraordinarily fragile. Most people end up doing damage. When they fine tune a LLM, LLMs go through catastrophic forgetting, and you completely undo the brains of the LLM. You screw it up. And so how not to do that and how to create enterprise class really fine-tuned models and domain adaptations of the LLM to your specific problem domain. That is the LLM fine-tuning course. That's coming up in March end. And then there is a graph neural networks class, which is coming up in April. As you know, graph neural networks and these things are of great value these days. The state-of-the-art recommender systems, the state-of-the-art search, the state-of-the-art fraud detection, all come from graph theory. In fact, all molecules are graphs. And as you know, this related in a related sort of a strain, you could argue that it contributed to some extent to the Nobel Prize of this year, which was on proteins, though that had more things to it. Right? So you can go and learn more about our courses. I invite you to do that. We have extensive documentation here, what it is. If you're confused about which courses to take, go to Learning Journey. Sorry for this digression, guys. Go to the Learning Journeys. You want to say, what is your destination? What do you want to be? If you want to be a machine learning AI engineer, then these are the courses you should take. If you want to be ML ops engineer, well, you need to just take these two courses and then specialize. We always say take the foundational courses and then take the rest specializations on a need to do basis. If you want to be an AI leader, just take foundational courses and that should be enough. The so-called prompt engineering, then this is what you want to do. If you want to do prompt engineering, just take the foundationals and a prompt engineering course. And there are certain free courses we offer optional for all of you. As you know, we have already given a data wrangling class. We'll soon, we gave a data visualization class last month, not even a month ago. Kyle here in the audience, she gave it. And now I will be giving the introduction to data science. By the way, this is an announcement. I haven't posted on the web. This is again a free class, introduction to data science. It will be next week from Monday to Friday. Monday to Friday, right? So 5 evenings, introduction to data science. We'll talk about what is machine learning, how to do small projects in machine learning. Then we'll deal with 4 broad areas of machine learning: clustering, classification, regression, and dimensionality reduction. It's absolutely free, guys. I'll post it on Meetup. Please do come and join it. It's been a popular course that we give. And if nothing else, 5 evening commitment will give you a broad understanding of machine learning as a subject. So that is that. Now coming back to our thing, and now this is only for those of you who are planning to do courses here. What I will do is I'll show you a script that we created that will help you get bootstrapped into neural networks and large language models. As you know, the foundational courses that are coming up from the first week of February, they are talking about neural networks and this. Now, when you deal with large language models and all of this multimodal, etc., people go through hell setting up the development environment. It's not easy. This doesn't work with that and that doesn't work with this. We have been seeing that happen for quite some time, and our teaching assistants would usually step in and help. But let's try it now. I will call it as we learn. Let me just call it as we learn February course. I'll just create a project called init SVLearn February. Once again, highly recommend that you use Python version 3.11 or 3.12. I'll just go with 3.12. Let's go to SVLearn Feb. Again, I entered the directory, as you notice. What will I do? What is the next thing we do? We need to get this environment set up, right? Virtual environment set up. So you would do UV sync this, and a virtual environment is set up. Let's enter the virtual environment. Again, as you recall, that's what we do with this command. And now here is something I would suggest. Made it very easy. Don't have to run through the long list of dependencies for large language models, etc. We will give you a file called this, which is on the web. You can just wget it, but here I'm copying it locally. Bring it over. You will notice that we have a file for you. And sure, this, it's a pretty long script, but you don't have to worry about it. Just run this script. Ensure config. When you do this ensure config, it will run. It will ask you for a Python module. Like good projects are created as a proper project, as a module. So we will say SVLearn. Let me just call it February. There it is. What's the project name? Let's just say February LLM Bootcamp. Let's say you give it project and starting on the LLM Bootcamp. And let's say that you are doing this. You're going to write your own code here and Feb Bootcamp URL and see what it does. Do you notice that it's installing 209 dependencies, right? If you look into that, now there's a little alias I create, but ignore that. If I do LL, you notice that it has created a lot of things. It has created your virtual environment, which was already there, but it has created a test directory. It has created a source directory. It has moved the hello world into the right place. It has created a config file, right? This is just, all of us in our project have some YAML file to keep our configuration. So it has created that. It has created a SRC directory in which you remember that your package name, what was your package name? SRC, SVLearn Feb. Right? So here is SVLearn Feb. It has done that. It has also done, in the init file, by the way, this is one of the supporting libraries that we give you to make your life easy to deal with configuration and other things and things, helper methods for this. This will make sure that your environment is fully set up automatically. Then let's go back up. You also have, well, obviously the docs. And in the docs, you'll notice that, let's go to docs. You will notice that some helper things are there, API docs, images, JavaScripts, tips and tricks, etc., etc. All of those has been created for you. You can come back and do the usual stuff. You can say UV, sync upgrade is not, you can do UV build. And you notice that your library is built. You can say UV run. Now, at this moment, SRC hello, and your code runs. You can even publish it. I won't do the publication part, but you can do mkdocs, mkdocs serve. Right? And if you do mkdocs serve, you will notice that you can click on it. And most of you know that open source projects have a nice read the doc kind of a portal, open source portal. So now it has also created a little portal for your project with some basic. This is one of the things when you do AI, you deal with something called the CUDA hell. CUDA keeps running out of memory and you have to flush it and so forth. So we have added that one file to it. But the rest of it is on you. As you build out this project, you can do things and make it happen. And so that is it, guys. It is as simple as that. You notice that throughout this process, I just used a couple of very, very simple commands. UV init, UV sync, UV build, UV publish. Just 4 or 5 commands. And that's all you need to know to do much of your work. And UV takes care of the things in the background. Now, what I will do is I'm going to, would anybody like to ask a question on record? Otherwise, I'll stop the recording and then we will go into a TA mode. Oh, it is very simple. Yes, yes. That is, That one is, there is a file. We will give it to you. It is literally called ensure config. It just makes sure that your environment is completely set up. Everything. It will do everything for you. Yes, that's exactly what I ran. Yeah. So it does a lot of things, and it even asks you for your project name and everything. I can repeat this. I can do it all over again. Let's go and do it all over again for a different project. Let me do that. Yeah. Yeah, create 2 projects. No, you don't have to. You can. You just create a root directory for your projects, and then inside it, create each. Will have its own separate directory. Yeah. So I'll repeat this for those of you who sort of felt it went too fast for the support vectors project.
Now, the question is, if I'm taking multiple courses at support vectors, how do I organize my the code for each of them using UV? Is there a recommended way?
Yeah. Okay. So the answer to that is it doesn't matter. Just create a root directory for all your projects, and within that root directory, go about creating all these sub projects.
So the root project is support vectors, and then I have
Yeah.
LLM1,
Yeah.
intro,
So forth.
graph learning.
That is
Okay,
right.
that's the better
Yeah.
structure.
And actually, that's a very good question, because one of the beauty of UV is that it makes sure that each of your virtual environments is isolated. So one project won't interfere with the other project, no matter where you keep it. Right? So I'll do this. I'll repeat the whole process again. UV init Sanjay. And once again, you remember not necessary, but a good practice to specify the Python version. For AI, I would say it's practically a necessity. So I'm going to enter Sanjay. Remember, the first thing we do is UV sync upgrade. It will create the virtual environment. I'm going to fire up the virtual environment, activate it. I've activated it. Now what I'll do is I'll copy that shell script that we have created for you. Once you have created the shell script, you notice that there's a shell script ensure config. Right? It is already, by the way, I think posted on the course portal. We are going to do that. Once you do the ensure config, right, all you have to do is run it. And when you run it, it will ask you, what is the Python module? What do you want to call this Python module? Let's say that we want to call it your name, Sanjay. It's your library, right? Sanjay. What is the project name? Sanjay LLM1, let's say. And now you say all the labs and projects, let's say something like this, right? You do this. The URL, let's just call it Sanjay. There we go. Now you notice that 209 libraries just got installed. 209. Yeah. And by the way, these are not minor libraries, because if you look at Python, it is depending on SV boot, SV learn boot. If I want to show you what we did in the background to make it easy for you, if you go to SV learn bootcamp, because it's a bootcamp, and you look at this project's by dependency, you notice that it depends upon these things: PyTorch, Torch, audio, blah blah blah, right? But it also depends on SV learn core, right? Now, what does SV learn core depend upon? SV learn core is a project that we have. Let's look into the Tamil. And here you notice that there's a long list of libraries that it depends upon, right? So we have very carefully managed all the dependencies so that your project, like when you go back now and look at your Sanjay, your project, see how clean it looks. Your dependency looks so clean, isn't it? You just depend upon support vectors bootcamp library. And what we do is, you notice that it's already at 0.1.7, seventh version. We carefully manage and make sure that we are in sync with the latest. So if you just stay with us and UV sync, we make sure that all the dependencies work correctly together. You don't have to worry about it. Yeah, yeah. So we will take care of all of that, everything. So we have much better dependency management going forward here. So this is it, guys. So I hope you benefited somewhat from this setup session. And I look forward to seeing you. As I mentioned, next week, we are giving a free course, introduction, a hands-on intuitive introduction to data science. It's a 5-evening course. When you come for that, it won't be just an hour. It will be 3 hours, 7 to 10. Right? We'll make it extensive. So it's a 15-hour course that we are offering. We don't, it's a free course, but we do expect that you bring your laptop, and sincerity.
And install, you will learn.
And install UV. Just no, not install UV. UV. Just
You will
install the
just
UV
you will.
tool. That's right. All right, guys. So that's all I have. Any other question on record before I stop? Before we stop the recording? I hope you guys did find the session today useful. Tomorrow, remember, there's a paper reading, a wonderful paper, Titans from Google, and it may well be one of the seminal papers of this year. And Krishnan Ramasamy, a very senior technical resource from Cisco, he'll be explaining and walking through the paper. Any other thought?
Thank you for the wonderful session. Thanks.
Thank you, Sanjay. All right, guys. So I'll see you folks tomorrow, and I'll see you next week in the course.
One last question, right? For the February 1st, 4th course, right? What are
Yes.
the mathematical topics we need to refresh it? Can you type
See,
it?
don't. If you have gone through today's setup, you're ready. Now, I highly, highly recommend that you take the free course we are offering next week. One
Okay.
of the reasons we are offering that is while it is not required, as an optional course, it is the best refresher or prerequisites fulfilling uh, journey that you can possibly take.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
In fact, some of you, Srinivas Deshpande, you have taken through that whole thing before. You can speak about it. Or Sanjeev, you also have taken it, isn't it? So you guys have probably you can tell how useful it was or wasn't.
And definitely, like for the first timers, it is really awesome to get hang of it.
Thank you.
I'll definitely recommend basically people to spend some time. This will also help later on with the looking into different algorithms like what is classifier, what is regression, etc. Those are very simple concepts, but when your Asif goes fast, you may feel like left behind. If you take it, it will be useful for you.
Also, I must say that in the course, we have 7 teaching assistants who will be helping you throughout the course. Lots of tools, so don't worry. We do carry everybody forward and make sure
Oh,
you're
the
not
truth. Yeah,
behind.
I should say that too.
So
Didn't want to
where do
scare.
you find the previous day recordings? Asif?
Oh, yes. All the recordings will be there. See, we have a very, very well organized course portal and a whole team of 7 TAs. So, what happens is this particular lecture, for example, will show up in YouTube. Every single lecture shows up on the course portal. And your course portal is yours forever. You can keep visiting it over and over again. It is rich with web resources, with YouTube, my lectures, with textbook references, article references, references to others' YouTube, excellent, curated list of YouTube lectures. And it will have quizzes, it will have labs, it will have source code, copious amounts of source code. So, I mean, yeah, we run the courses that we run here. We would like to claim that we run it at the same level of rigor and standard as any of the top universities in US. All right, folks. So with that, I'll stop there, guys.